Don't give you. Oh, there it is. Broadcast is live.
Yay.
Would you like to start us off? Because I'm always terrible at that.
Sure. I'm just going to retwitter.
Okay. Retweet.
Goodness, we're talking new iPad Pro, MacBook Air, and Mac Mini. All right. Are you good to go?
I am good to go.
It is Friday, November 2. November already. Yeah. Seriously. I'm Rene Ritchie, and right now we're going to talk about all the new stuff Apple debuted at their October event, including the new iPad Pro, new Mac Mini, new MacBook Air, and maybe we'll even talk about them shutting down all them numbers on the investors call, because this is the iMore show. Joining me today, I have the Queen of Dragons, the Dragon Goddess of the Angarak, the Riven Queen. I think I forget all your titles, Lori, but you are Lori Gill.
I don't know. I like what you're coming up with. This sounds way better than what my current joke is.
How are you doing?
Excellent. How are you?
I have not slept yet, so I'm a little goofy.
Know. You poor thing. I'm sorry. I'm making you join me on this podcast instead of sleeping right now.
No, it was for good. We managed to get a really good interview with Tom. I'm gonna mess up his name because I'm so tired. Tom Boger, who is the Senior Director of Mac Product Marketing. So he works for Greg Joswiak and Phil Schiller, and he sat down with us and chatted all about the past, present, and future of the Mac.
And that was, so let me just say right now, let me admit to this. I have had way too busy of a morning. I haven't had a chance to actually listen to the interview yet. But give me a couple of little highlights. Don't give away anything that I want to hear later, but some highlights.
For the past, he talks about his first Mac and also the first Mac he worked on at Apple, which might have come in Bondi Blue and Blue Dalmatian. I don't know. For the present of Mac, he talked about sort of now that they have several laptops, which is the best one, several notebooks, which is the best one for which sort of kind of customer, and also how they make decisions about things like, can you swap the RAM in one and not the other, or why is the memory soldered on the board, all those sorts of things that people get really angsty about on the internet. And for the future, he sort of talked about Apple's commitment to the Mac and where they're going to go from here. So I think it's worth a listen.
Yeah, I'm excited, especially because Apple's been talking about the future of Mac for 2 years now, and there have been some really major releases, but I still don't think that the Mac is as big as, obviously, as the iPhone, but even as the iPad. And I do feel Macintosh is what started Apple as a company, and I do feel like for decades, they've, or at least for 10 years, they've put Mac on the burner and focused on mobile. And I like this idea that they're going back to their roots and they're going back to what made the company what it was to begin with. So I'm very excited to see all the things that are coming in the future for Mac. And so far, what they've brought to the table has been pretty exciting. Mac Mini that just came out. That was something that we really didn't expect. Up until the rumors started coming around, we didn't expect to see any Mac Mini refresh. I mean, it was practically on the chopping block as far as I was concerned. And they brought it back from near death and got us re-excited about it.
And some people were super salty that it didn't look different. But the Mac Mini customer isn't the same as it used to be. Back in the early days when Steve Jobs introduced it, it really was a switcher machine. It's somebody who had a beige box PC on their desk, and they were going to yank the beige box part out, keep the monitor, keep the keyboard, keep the mouse, and just plug in the Mac Mini. And that was going to be their first starter Mac. But now people who want starter Macs want notebooks. They want screens, and they want keyboards that come with it. And so that's why the MacBook Air was so popular. And the Mac Mini, though, has found this niche, not just for home theater and not just for, students, but really as production equipment in musical, in concerts, in graphics design companies, in movie companies. It is everywhere. And they showed off, like, people use them in stacks. Like, they had stacks. I was like, I wanted to play Jenga with them so badly. Stacks of Mac Minis.
That room that they showed when they were showing off the different
Mac
things.
Stadium.
The Mac Stadium, that was so impressive. I was very excited to see that. I mean, wow, that's a lot of Mac Minis right there.
Yeah, so they're designed to be one server unit. So if you go to Mac Mini and say, hey, just because the internet says we have to be quote unquote innovative and doesn't really understand the meaning of quote unquote innovative, we're going to change it by just enough that's going to screw up your entire business and all your racks and how you mount them for no good reason other than we were told to make them a triangle this time.
So I said this on Mac Break Weekly. This is the first time in a while, I think, that Apple has stopped listening to the broader audience and said, we're focusing on this niche crowd right now, and we're going to give them exactly what they want. They gave the Mac Mini fans, the ones who use it constantly, a faster processor, a more powerful machine, but they kept everything else the same. They didn't make it look cooler, but make it, impossible to make any changes or something like that. They really did give the niche Mac Mini market exactly what they wanted. And I think that I was really impressed with the way they went about doing this. It's a big deal, but it's only a big deal for a certain segment of the audience. And Apple is not trying to grow its Mac Mini user base. It's trying to make its current Mac Mini user base happy.
Yeah, totally. It's more Mac Mini to love. And maybe some people who've been holding out for a Mac Pro will see like the 6-core, 64 gigabyte, 2 terabyte version and say, I don't really need that. Or I can wait a little while on that Pro. I'm going to get the Mini instead. But I think for a lot of people, it's exactly what you said. They're going to get the size that they need and the quantity that they need to get the job done that they need. And that's all they've ever wanted from the Mini.
Yeah, yeah. So it's an exciting little addition to the family. It's good to see that Apple didn't just decide it's too much work and not enough money coming in. I'm glad that they decided to cater to the market that loves it. So when you see how far Apple is advancing with iPhone and iPad, you really do start to question whether or not they're just listening to the numbers and forgetting their audience. And here's an example of them remembering who got them off the ground, who got them started, which are these very, very specific fans of Apple products and computing needs and things like that.
So I have a suspicion. That they did not intend, maybe, and I might be totally wrong with this, but I have a suspicion that they did not intend to update the Mac Mini and the MacBook Air this year. That they were not able to make the Mac Mini and the MacBook Air that they wanted because, and I sound like a broken record with this, but Intel really has dropped the ball. Every time I go to sleep, I wake up, there's a new interim Intel architecture. And it's like when Apple transitioned from PowerPC, it could no longer give them the performance per watt hour that they wanted. It just wasn't efficient enough and they had to go to Intel. And I think they're on the cusp of maybe going to ARM. Like we're seeing those new iPad Pros, we'll talk about in a minute, are getting MacBook Pro level performance. And it's just not everything is in place yet. And if it had been, I think we would have seen these either last year, this year, or next year, maybe with ARM chips, and we wouldn't have gotten another Intel generation of either one. But I think the stars did not align. It had been too long. People were too vocal, and Apple felt they had to do something this year to get those products going again.
So if that's the case, then do you think we're going to see another refresh of Mac Mini and MacBook Air in the near future when ARM is ready?
I think either way, I think Apple just has to get back on the cadence of, even if it's just the spec refresh, like Intel craps out, I don't even know what they're going to do next. Right now, there's so many lakes, Lori. It was supposed to be two. It's supposed to be Sky Lake and then Cannon Lake. And then we got
Some KBs and some
Coffee Lake
coffees.
and Whiskey Lake and Amber Lake and Ice Lake. And it feels like the Thousand Island Lakes now for all of that. But yeah,
The Lake of Dragons.
I hope they're ready to make it soon. There's been rumors about 2019, 2020, those sorts of things. But if not, I hope they just do the minimum spec. And I say that, but they still have to devote engineers to, they have to get the parts from Intel. They have to put them in. They have to integrate everything, power nap, all the kind of stuff that they do. They have to test them. They have to do all that kind of stuff. So it is a little bit overhead, but I hope they at least still do the spec bumps. I think we need that to be a yearly cadence.
Yeah, well, with non-mobile devices, I think holding out for 2 years is not an unacceptable thing. If there's not a refresh in even a spec bump of a MacBook or a MacBook Air or a MacBook Pro until 2020, I don't think that that's necessarily going to be to the detriment of
but Reddit will get so angry, Lori.
Well, everybody's going to be angry if they're not angry at how often it's being refreshed. They're angry at what's being refreshed. So
I
nobody's
just
going to be
bought one and
happy.
now you put out a new one and you totally screwed me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So in addition to Mac Mini, we also heard the big news about MacBook Air.
Yeah. What do you think? It's like for me, it was like a 12-inch MacBook had a baby with the original MacBook Air.
Yeah, so I don't we don't know what Apple is planning in the future for the laptop line. I guess it's been called the notebook line for a while now, but I still
Yeah, and
call
like
them
they were
laptops.
trying portables for a while. I think they've gone back to notebooks. It's kind of weird
I mean just call them laptops. Why you got to change the name, you know?
because you put other things on your lap now. I think because they make iPads and you can put those on your laps too.
I guess. I'm the yeah, okay. So the in that regard, the MacBook Air is exactly that. It's a hybrid of the original MacBook or the older version MacBook Air and the MacBook.
Yeah.
So that being said, why do we need the MacBook? I think it's time. Like this is a great in between. It's light, it's thin, it has minimal features, but just enough to get by. And the MacBook kind of feels like it's already that. You can get such a massive amount. I think it's 1.5 terabyte storage in
Yeah.
MacBook Air. So it's big, it's good, it's powerful. It's not as powerful as the MacBook Pro, but it's not a pro level computer. So who needs the MacBook? It's this in between that now the MacBook Air, in my opinion, replaces. It doesn't mean Apple's going to do what they're going to do, but I think it might be them kind of positioning that to kind of replace the MacBook, and that maybe over the next couple of years we'll see even a little bit more features put into MacBook Air, and then MacBook just kind of like quietly shoved under the rug.
So I have like two feelings on this. First, they did not update the MacBook so far this year. They did not give it a refresh. Well, they gave it a new paint job. It's got the new gold color, but it does not have any eighth generation Intel processors in it. It's still seventh generation from last year. So that kind of makes it seem like they're winding down on it. But, and I'm going to totally copy Tom's answer here, and I think Phil Schiller might have said this at some point too. I don't remember. There are customers who will literally pay anything for the lightest, smallest, tiniest MacBook. They're executives, they're VCs, they're influencers, maybe. I don't know. They just want the absolute lightest Mac they can throw in the absolute tiniest designer backpack, throw it on their shoulder. And Tom didn't say any of this. I'm exaggerating greatly for effect, but they want to just take it with them, and they want it to basically be an iPad and Mac's clothing. It's just an ultimate ultralight, and they'll pay a huge premium for that. And then on the other side, there are people who are producing videos and music, and they need a MacBook Pro and discrete graphics and all that power, and they're willing to pay for that. And then in between those two extremes, you have the Air, which I think Apple is calling and maybe Tom said this too, exactly. It's the perfect MacBook to take with you everywhere to do anything you want to do with. So it's like the every person MacBook. If you don't need the extreme power or the extreme portability, you go MacBook Air.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah, that makes it. So MacBook Air is it still the lightest, or I can't remember now the weight of it as compared to the
It's
other.
not as light as the 12-inch MacBook. 12-inch MacBook is still
It's still the
main
lightest one.
snowflake of the lineup. Yes.
Okay. Yep. So, are you getting a MacBook Air?
I lived on a MacBook Air. I had the original one, which wasn't that useful. And so one thing I'll address too is the price. People are a little bit salty over the price. It's $11.99. But I just want to remind everybody, the MacBook Air never starts cheap. Whenever Apple revs it, the original one was super expensive, and it didn't go down that much. When the second generation came out, I think it was $11.99 too. It took like a year or two for it to go down to $9.99. And I think that's, Apple will recoup the money they've spent on developing it fast. And then once they do, and the scale increases and the costs go down, they're happy to pass along those savings. So like within a year or two, I expect it to go down to $9.99. At least I hope it does.
Except for now that you're saying this, everybody's going to wait to buy their MacBook Air, so it's going to stay at $11.99.
No, see, they don't. They're like, oh, I need it. And they don't even need it. They just want to be seen at Starbucks with it. Humans are
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, so I lived on it for years, and the only thing that made me change was that I could not, when I started doing a lot of video, I could not render video fast enough, especially if I was at an event. It would take like an hour instead of like 10 minutes, and that's just, that's death. So I moved up to a 13-inch MacBook Pro, and then now a 15-inch MacBook Pro, because
You've
to
gotten
me the
bigger and
speed is
bigger.
everything. Yeah, I don't want it to be that big, but I need that rendering speed. And so that was it. But otherwise, I'd be so happy on that MacBook Air.
So the MacBook Air though, its updates are pretty impressive. I'm trying to
Yeah.
find the detailed information. It has an eighth
There's one other
generation
controversy,
Intel.
and I want to get your opinion on it, Lori.
Okay.
So Apple so Intel has two different sorts of classes of processor. One is the Y series and one is the U series. The Y series is sort of what's been in the MacBook. The latest generation is Whiskey Lake for the Y and Coffee Lake for the U. So Apple went with the Whiskey Lake in the MacBook Air. It previously had the full CPU. Now it's got the more mobile CPU in it. Um, and some people think that that in itself is inexcusable. Other people believe that as long as the frequencies, like the base frequency, the turbo frequency are the same, and it's not too hot, like it's within the thermal constraints of the device, people shouldn't worry about which chip it is. They should just worry about the performance that it gives them.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So, give me a little more different detail on the differences between the two, other than what products they are inside right now.
So the Y is not it's built less for performance and more for portability. It can go into smaller
Okay.
machines and run cooler for longer. The
Right.
U is really built for ultimate performance. Like it's supposed to go in bigger machines and it runs hotter and it runs faster, but not always for as long.
And U is in MacBook Pro and Y
Yes.
is in MacBook Air. So,
Yes.
uh, yeah, so I think what we're dealing with here and why these decisions would have been made, in my opinion, is that MacBook Pro is for people who are going to use a lot of processing power.
Who
MacBook
knows what those
Air,
things are?
who knows? Yeah, who actually knows the differences between those chips. And MacBook Air is marketed for people who go to business meetings, who maybe they need to set up um, a, something on a screen that they need to show something off, but they're not actually editing film right there on their computer. It's so they can take it with them so that they can use things quickly, not heavy processing power in.
Or if they are, they don't care if it takes an hour to render.
Right. It's not meant for that heavy user. And if you're kind of taking issue with it, with Apple choosing the lighter, more portable chip in a computer that's specifically intended for the lighter, more portable use, then you're kind of going at it the wrong way. If it's MacBook Pro, yeah, you better have the fastest processor that's around because it's for the Pro.
Yeah.
But it makes a lot of sense that they would go let's call it the lesser chip,
Yeah.
in the Air, because the Air is not supposed to be a Pro. It's not MacBook Air Pro.
Yes.
It's just MacBook Air.
They have one of those. They have the one without touch bar if you really want.
Yeah, right.
And frankly, they had me at whiskey.
I know you win me when you have whiskey. I don't need ice. I don't need coffee. Well, no, that's not true. I do need coffee.
I want all those things now.
So with the upgrade though, you were saying a few years ago you were using MacBook Air and you were stalwarted by the slow processing speeds. Have you tried doing that with MacBook Air? Have you had a sample model to give you any kind of idea of how fast it is, or even just based on the specs? Do you think that is improved enough that you could do some film editing on it, or do you think that it's still,
I'm sure
even with its upgrades?
I've done it on the 12-inch MacBook previously. It's just hella slow. And and back then it was like when I was doing almost no video, that didn't matter. I would just like put it on and literally go get coffee. But now that I'm doing a ton of video, it really does matter.
Yeah.
So I could, if I wasn't doing any video, like if I was just doing like the written and the photography and stuff for iMore, I would go to it immediately. I wouldn't even think about it. I'd be like, so much lighter in my life, in my backpack, and it's not quite as constrained as a 12-inch, and it's sold.
Yeah, I think it sounds like the Air is actually more for someone like me. I do zero video editing.
Oh,
so
it's a blogger's dream machine.
Yeah, so I haven't ordered one yet, but it was been kind of weighing whether or not I should. I did get the latest 11-inch MacBook Pro, so it was kind of like two big purchases at once. Do I really need that? I do have a very new MacBook Pro, even though it's definitely more power than I need. Up until this year, I felt like the other MacBook line was less than I needed. So that's why I went with Pro. But now that the Air has this kind of the spec bump that I think is perfect for someone like me, I might just go ahead and get one.
And gold, it's just so gold.
It's so gold. You did see the gold in real
Yes.
life. So the
Yes.
images that they use for marketing right on Apple, right on their
Yeah.
store line, seems really orangey to me. Am I wrong on that?
No, it's like this new gold there. I don't know if it's color matched because I wasn't wearing the gold watch, so I don't know if it's color matched to that or not. But it's a little rosy and brassy. It is their new gold. And they got rid of rose gold. You think that they've had a war on bezels? Man, rose gold better run for its life. It is it's gone everywhere now.
The weird thing is that the color rose has become a very popular color amongst younger people. And it's at this point that Apple was like, everybody else likes it. Forget it. We're not into that anymore.
They're
That's
like
so last
Gina
year.
on Brooklyn Nine-Nine. It's like, I'm an originator.
Yeah, they've moved on. So you're saying that the gold it's probably more closely aligned to the way the stainless steel Apple Watches
Yeah, and the gold iPhone. I think the band
and the
around
gold
the
iPhone.
gold, but that's stainless steel, so it's not quite the same.
Mm.
Maybe the band around the yellow iPhone. I'd have to see it all together. I can't. Because I saw it in isolation. They have like tables in the hands-on area, but there's only one product on it, and I wasn't smart enough to bring a lot of gold stuff. I wasn't expecting this radical goldalization of everything.
Yeah. So I think then if I have you seen the MacBook Air on Apple's shop page where you go to buy it? They
Yeah, I
have
guess I really did.
and they have on the screen, they have this beautiful screensaver or background image, but the color of that in an attempt to sort of match the MacBook Air, it's bright oranges and yellows and pinks. And for some reason, my brain looks at it and I look at this gold and it's like an orangey gold color. But it
Yeah,
sounds like maybe it's just that my brain, like if there were a blue background image instead of an orangey, yellowy, pinky one, maybe I would see it as more of a sort of a flat standard gold color. So I think
it's
they
off
might have.
gold. Like it's definitely rosier than regular gold.
It is a little rosier, but not
Yeah.
orange.
No, no, I wouldn't call it orange. I mean, it's hard to
Okay,
tell because the lighting makes so much difference. Like
I
in a couple
know.
of pictures I took, it looks really more yellowy, bronzy gold, and others it does look more rosy. So
Gold is a weird
Apple,
color to try to translate to images. I think nobody can ever take a picture of a gold colored device and then share that picture and say, this is what the gold looks like, because it just looks so different. It like the lighting makes such a huge effect on what that looks like. So it's hard. So I'm just gonna have to go in the store and take a look at it and find out for myself. I'm well, no, that's not true. Now I have all of the colors. I have the gold iPhone 10s, the rose gold iPhone 5s, the silver iPhone 7 Plus, and the space black or space gray iPhone 10. So I
they're all over the
guess,
place.
yeah, I've got all the colors now. I was
You're
gonna
eclectic.
say I'm kind of all in on the space black, but that's actually not true. I'm all across the board. I have all the colors.
Well, they made it easy for you with the iPad Pro because they got rid of any color other than silver and space gray. They used to have the 9.7 and then the 10.5 available in at least one other color, but now it's all grown up and serious, and you can only get it in your choice of silver and space gray.
You could still go with the old iPhone, the old outdated iPhone or iPad Pro 10.5 because
Yes.
I believe it's still in gold. Or is it
Yeah.
rose gold?
I think it was both. I don't
I
remember.
can't remember now.
I'm gonna go to Apple and look.
Okay.
Real time
Yeah,
follow.
so the color options, and there's not even a front bezel color difference now. There's not a
No.
white front
Nope.
bezel on the silver. It's the very small bezel that's there is black on both of them.
Yeah. This has basically got the iPhone 10 treatment. Yeah, there is a rose gold and a gold. See, this is all the golds that God intended. I understand.
Well, Apple doesn't want you to pick those colors anymore.
No, they're like I said, they're an originator. Now that everybody's doing it, they got to do something else.
Yeah. Well, they should have made it like green or something.
The weirdest thing about the iPad Pro, and it kept happening to people around me, is that they pick it up and they go, where's the bigger one? And the person at the table would say, that is the bigger one.
The 12.9.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
When I was tossing back and forth which one I wanted to pick, I had the option. I currently have the 9.7-inch iPad Pro, so I've got sort of the very old model of the smaller of the Baby Pro, I think is what we were calling
Yeah.
it.
TM Serenity Caldwell.
Yeah. So it was. I love my 12.9-inch. I think it's amazing. I don't think it's too heavy. I don't think it's too big. I love it. I take it with me whenever I do conferences. It acts
But
like a second
it
computer.
is basically laptop sized.
Right, it is. And I love it for that. So when I was making that decision, I thought, well, I don't need a smaller iPad. I just want a different iPad. So that's why I went with the 11-inch because for one thing, I had never had a 10.5-inch. So I don't
Okay.
have a 10.5 to 11-inch comparison. But I like the idea of the smaller iPad Pro with the larger screen. So I can scale down while still having a very big, beautiful screen. But what I'm hearing about people thinking that the 12.9-inch is actually the 11-inch. Oh man, now I want to check it out and see how it compares to the 12.9 that I have because it is the size. It's literally the size of a laptop in the casing size. Like I can set it on top of my MacBook Air and it looks like it's just a third part of my MacBook Air.
Yeah, and well, I mean, you can spend up to 2 weeks making up your mind, Lori. I mean, like you can take it back and say, nope, I want the bigger one if you want to. You can
I
go see it in the
could.
store and decide, I'm not going back. Well, yeah, once you go to the once you go to the Biggie Pro, you can't go back. If you decide that, you can always switch them. So if people are like nervous about it, you can go look at the store and buy one. And if you're still not happy with it, you can exchange it.
Yeah, that's something that I think, when people are trying to make that decision and they're asking all kinds of questions about, like, well, what about this? What about that? What about the size? Is it too heavy? You can take it back. You can exchange it. You do have 2 weeks. Apple gives you 2 weeks to basically take it for a test run and decide if that's really what you want, or if you want something different, or if you just don't want it at all and you're happy with what you already have, or happy not having anything at all.
Yeah, I mean, take advantage of it too.
Yeah, definitely. So with MacBook Pro, so actually talk about the specs just a little bit. I'm sure that everybody watching this they already know the specs, but let's get into it just a little bit with the differences between the two. A quick rundown is that the iPad Pro, the 12.9-inch iPad Pro has a larger, has a smaller body with a
Yeah.
larger screen.
So the
And
screen stayed the same. The 12.9-inch screen stayed the same, but the casing shrunk. On the other one, the casing stayed the same and the screen expanded.
grew. Yes. So you're
Yeah.
getting a larger screen on the 11
Yeah.
inch, but the casing itself is pretty much the same
Yes.
size as the 10.5-inch. And the 12.9, the screen pretty much stayed the same, but they shrunk down the body for it. So that's the difference between the two, if you're wondering. So basically, when it comes to actually the screen, that's what we're looking at. We may hold our iPads in our hands and things like that, but what we're looking at is the screen. So for me, if I'm already looking at a 12.9-inch screen, if I'm switching to the 2018 12.9-inch iPad Pro, I'm not seeing any difference. But if I'm switching from, in my case, the 9.7, and in the current case, the 10.5 to the 11, I'm going to be looking at a larger screen. It's bigger, and I will notice that larger difference because I'm looking at a screen that's actually bigger, even though the case is the same size. So that's kind of an exciting idea to look at. We've got no home button. They ousted the home button on yet another one of their devices and replaced it
When you
with,
murder a bezel, the home button is collateral damage.
yep. And they replaced it with the Face ID. And even though it's been, a year and a half, I guess, at this point, or over a year, since Face ID first launched on iPhone 10. And there haven't been any serious issues. And the only kind of, faking out Face ID has been either debunked as incorrect, or we've learned that people were accidentally sharing someone else's face and allowing their face to unlock it.
Well,
And
there was Apple said up front that if you it is more secure with people who are not genetically linked to you. Like, there's a less chance that they can spoof it. But if you have a very close family relative with very similar facial geometry, and especially around the kids' age, because their facial features haven't set yet, then there's a higher false positive rate because it's
And
actually looking at your genetic bone structure.
yeah, and there's the issue with if I have, like, say my mom, her and I have similar enough facial features, which by the way, I still don't think that it would unlock it. We're not that close enough looking. But if that were the case and she picks up my phone and Face ID fails and then I
Yes.
type in my password,
Yes.
then the phone has just learned that face. And
Yes.
so
That's an
then the
alternate. It
phone is
now thinks that's
now
an alternate appearance of you.
right. And so I think that
Yeah.
in when iPhone 10 first came out and there was lots of people trying to trick Face ID, the few times that it did happen and it didn't seem to be any other reason, it was probably because somebody was unlocking the phone with a passcode and the phone was then learning these facial features and saying, okay, so this is
Yes.
what this person looks like when they first get up in the morning, or something like that. So basically I think what I'm getting at for anybody who's still afraid of Face ID, it's secure. It's not something to worry about. Apple doesn't store your facial impressions. It's all stored on your phone in the T2 chip. It's secure. It's safe. It's only as unsecure as any other biometric scanning, and more secure than Touch ID because there's less chances of it accidentally working on somebody else.
Yeah, and the
Um,
important thing to remember is that biometrics is not a password. It's basically like a username. It's a convenience. If you want super security, use it. Don't even use a passcode. Use a long, strong, unique password. But if you want to get it easier and faster, and you just want to stop casual idiots from typing pooping into your Twitter feed, then you're really good with Face ID.
right. And if you are very concerned with the chance of Face ID or of the risk of somebody else accessing your phone through Face ID, use a long, strong password, exactly what you said, and don't use Face ID at all. Done.
Yeah,
You don't have to worry about it anymore. And there, for some people, the security factor is more important than the convenience factor. So
totally.
there you do have the opportunity to create long, complex passwords. You don't even have to use Apple's suggested 6-digit password. You can make it even longer if you want. It's up to you. You can be as complex as you want with that.
And the other thing is on iPad Pro, it's a little different because Apple's had more time, but also the iPad Pro is used differently. So on the iPhone, everything from the neural network models to the camera hardware is optimized for you to hold your iPhone vertically in front of you, top notch on the top, and unlock the phone. Where an iPad, there is no up and down, left or right. People just spin those things around. So while the camera is physically located in the same spot, once you set it up in portrait, you can use it in landscape, upside down portrait, while it's reclining back on the keyboard. It's got a much more complex neural model and hardware that is optimized for a wider field of view, not for trying to be as absolutely rock solid on your face.
I was impressed with the fact that there's no notch. And I know that there's a very slim bezel around the entire iPad Pro, the new iPad Pro. So obviously it's kind of trapped in there, but it seems almost too thin of a bezel to hide that Face ID. And maybe it's just because the screen is so much bigger than an iPhone screen that the bezel actually looks
Yeah,
a
that's
lot
it.
thinner. So like if you were to measure the bezel itself, it's probably about the same measurement as how thick the notch on the iPhone is,
Maybe
probably,
even,
right?
yeah, I wish I'd taken my iPhone out when I was there and done that. But yeah, it's more than enough. Like there's because it's a two-handed thing, and their palm rejection and thumb rejection, all that stuff is fantastic. Like I'm holding it with a finger on the screen, and it's still recognizing what the other finger is doing.
Nice.
So that's great. But there is a good enough bezel that you never need to worry that you're not able to hold on to it.
Yeah, that's great. Like, I think that was one of the big concerns that people had, and I know you haven't really had a lot of time to play with the iPad Pro. You just got a chance to demo it
Yeah.
at the meet and greet, if you will. But I think that's one of the biggest questions people have is whether or not this near bezel-less iPad has false touches. I experience it on my iPhone. I will accidentally swipe or accidentally touch something or trigger something. It happens to me all the time because there's like no bezel on the iPhone 10s and 10 and 10s Max, and I think there's always going to be some small level of accidental touch. This was something that people were concerned with when the iPad Air came out. The bezel on the iPad Air got
Yeah.
a lot smaller, and there was all kinds of questions and concerns about accidental touch. And now that the bezel is even smaller, yeah, there are going to be a handful of times where you accidentally swipe or accidentally touch something in a corner or off to an edge that it will recognize. But it sounds like they've really done a lot of technology to kind of keep those edges clear, and the iPad recognizing that this is just you holding the device, not trying to tap in.
Yeah, I mean, like they got really good at it with Apple Pencil because you could basically lean your hand on the display while using the pencil and ignore your hand and just use the pencil. And again, I haven't had a chance to put it through its paces yet, but I was just holding it in my hand and using it and didn't realize that half my, you know, ugly bag of mostly hand meat was just right over the screen, and it was totally ignoring it.
Do you remember, like, was it just your thumb, or did it also get all the way down to like the pad of your hand a little?
So, well, the only thing that I did have, it wasn't even an issue. Like I was holding it, and because the Face ID wasn't on me, obviously it was on the Apple marketing person next to me. They were going to do Face ID, and I was holding it in my hand right over the camera, and this thing came up on the screen right at the top where it said camera blocked, and then this arrow pointed at my hand on the screen where it was blocking the camera.
You were actually blocking the camera.
I had my hand over the whole camera to hold the iPad, yeah.
And it wasn't affecting the screen, but it was affecting the camera.
Yeah. Yeah. It was including the entire
lens. Let's have a quick chat real quick about the Apple Pencil 2.
Yes.
The number 2 pencil,
the number,
if you will.
they didn't call it that. So heartbroken.
I know. I mean, it's a softball. They could have totally let that one go and made that happen. The number 2 pencil.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it's really nice. I mean, it charges, it magnetically sticks, and has, like, when you get it in the right spot, it's got these magnets that just align it. So if you try to put it in the wrong area, you can tell. And when you get it in the right area, it really is just like AirPods, where it goes thunk and it just pulls itself into place. And it
has that nice little click.
Thing.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
Satisfying thing. And it charges right there, which is really great. And then you pull it off, and it's already paired because it pairs through the same sort of magnetic smart connector that you have on the top, and you just use it, and then you put it back on there. There's no more little screw cap to lose, and the coating is, I don't know how to describe it. Some people have called it matte, and I'm almost tempted to call it chalky, but it's not that. It's just it's not glossy anymore, I think, is what it is.
Interesting. So it maybe provides a slightly better grip without messing with the design of the Apple Pencil.
Yeah, I mean, one side is flat now because that's where it goes on to charge, and I kind of still wish they made it like a hexagonal, like a real pencil, like you're used to from a wooden pencil. I think that would be even cooler. But the rest of it is still round. The tip is exactly the same. It does say Apple Pencil on it now, and I'm never a fan of branding like that, especially Apple's trained me not to be. That's not my favorite thing, but like as a unit, it's a better pencil.
Do you think maybe they made the decision to add that wording onto the pencil itself so that people will know that they're not getting a fake pencil? Maybe. I mean, maybe that's part of it. The fact that one side is flat, and again, I know you haven't had a lot of time to play around with it, but could you tell, did it feel natural to keep that flat end away from your writing fingers? Because I'm imagining it would be uncomfortable if all of the pencil except one side was curved. If I had it in the wrong place, I would feel like it was uncomfortable. Did you naturally just kind of allow it to be in the position that was comfortable, or did you have to fiddle with it to get it in the right position?
I don't remember. The only thing I remember is I had the flat area under my index finger, and that felt like a normal pencil. I'm like, oh, this feels like an actual pencil because you're used to having a flat surface under your finger.
And the flat end is where they have the tap in, right? So that's where
Yeah.
you want it to
No,
be
the tap in is
anyway.
all around. The tap in goes all around the surface, so you can tap anywhere you want.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, it's not only on the flat edge of it. So
Yeah.
any part of it, I can tap in and whatever controls are available in that app will trigger. That's
Yep.
nice.
Yeah.
Real quick, we only have a couple more minutes. What does tapping in give me a little bit of information on when you double tap,
Yes.
something happens. And I know different developers are going to be able to add their own tools, but what exactly does this mean?
So I think, and I hope I remember this right, but I think the default is draw erase. So like if you're in an app that supports drawing, I don't think it does anything if you're not drawing. I have to double check that. But if you're drawing and like it's using Apple standard controllers, it'll toggle between draw and erase. And I think they said there's one other thing that it could do. My mind is blank. Oh, you can also optionally toggle between the two previous tools. So if you had like paintbrush and then crayon, you can use it to toggle back and forth between the last two tools that you used. But developers can override that. So I think Adobe on stage showed that they overrode it to do zoom in, zoom out. So you could edit at a pixel level or at the full screen level, which was cool.
I'm wondering, and this is probably definitely not something you could do, but the touch bar lets me as the user, control what shows up on my touch bar, what tools are easily accessible. It'd be interesting to see if it's a user mapping. So could I map a shortcut to the highlighter, whereas you could map a shortcut to the eraser?
Yeah, I don't know if they'll let you do that. Maybe because they just can't rely on a tool you might choose to actually be anywhere. Maybe apps will let you do that. Like maybe individual apps will let you do that within that app. But like if you map it to an eraser, then you go to an app that doesn't have an erase function. I don't know what it would do.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess we'll see. I'm pretty
Yeah,
excited.
yeah,
I
yeah.
love the new way of charging and the fact that it connects magnetically to the iPad Pro.
And USB-C now, you can connect it to internet. So like they had it connected to 5K displays there, and like you were drawing on the iPad Pro, and you could see the whole artwork in front of you on the screen.
Oh
Or they
man.
had DJ, which is one of like, my favorite DJ Pro, one of my favorite apps, and they were like spinning wicked tracks on there, and there was like all this animation going on in the monitor.
Oh, that's so great. It sounds
Cool.
awesome. I
Yeah,
can't wait.
no, it's great. And some people were saying you can't connect to the storage. So my understanding is that it's just USB-C. Apple has not artificially restricted it in any way. You just need an app that understands it. Like the built-in Files app doesn't understand external storage, at least not yet. Hopefully Apple will add that next year, or maybe sooner, hopefully. But if you get like, let's say someone who makes an external drive, like Mophie or Western Digital or whatever they are now, Seagate, whatever makes, let's see, makes a drive. All I have to do is make an app for it that talks to the drive. Then you load up that app, and you can move your files back and forth.
Okay, so yeah, that makes sense. It is data transfer. It's just that
Yeah,
it's just that the
iOS is
companies.
limited in what kinds of devices it understands at this point, but a developer can make it understand any device as long as they make an app for it.
What about USB-C microphones? Do you know whether or not it's going? Because I know that it has. I did a little bit of research, and it does have audio out. So I know headphones are going to be. They support it, but
Yeah.
I wasn't able to find out any information about microphones if you plugged a USB-C microphone into it.
Yeah, again, like I was doing that with Lightning on the iPhone. And you just needed the manufacturer's app.
Yep.
You'd plug in the Sennheiser or not Sennheiser, the Shure mic, and you'd launch the Shure app. And I think it's probably going to be similar.
That's what I was thinking. Is that as long as you have the app that kind of talks to your iPhone to tell your iPhone what to do, you're good to go. There has to just be like just one little in between conversation to get it all to work out. So
Yeah, totally.
yeah. Well, next week when we talk, we will have all of our gadgets in hand and we can talk about how much we love them.
And hopefully we'll have Micah and Georgia back. Both of them were
Yeah,
under the weather today, so
I
they couldn't
know.
join us.
I know.
Well, though Georgia was under the weather, Micah's poor little chihuahuas had too much cough.
Henry was unhappy tummy.
Well, yeah. And a chihuahua is seldom unhappy alone.
I know. All right. Well, we're out of time.
Yeah.
So Renee, will you say all of the thank yous for us? Because you know I'm terrible at this stuff.
All the thank yous for us. So first of all, thanks to Jim Metzendorf, who edits this show. Jim is under the weather, so we hope him. Wow, it is just a week of me and Lori alone.
I
We hope
know.
everyone feels so much better. Jim, please get well soon.
Yes,
And of
please.
course, if Georgia were here, you'd be able to find her at Georgia_Dow on Twitter. Even though she stopped using it, you can still find her there. It's complicated. Micah.com. Micah Sargent is at chihuahua.coffee on the internet. That'll lead you to every other place that he happens to be, which is quite a lot of places. You really need that short link for it. And what about you, Lori Gill? Where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter. I am a little active right now. I've been having some fun conversations about the upcoming products. On Twitter at Appoholik, that's APPAHOLIK. And you can find me at Lori Gill at most of the other social things.
Awesome. And you can find me at Renee Ritchie on the social things, and you can find me at imore.com/vector. You can listen to the interview we told you about at the beginning on the Vector podcast, which is just called Vector in iTunes. Sorry, Apple Podcasts. Don't hit me, Apple Podcast people. Overcast, Downcast, Pocket Cast, all the cast. And there's a bunch of really cool stuff going up on YouTube, including hands-on with all the stuff that we just talked about and a few other special surprises coming up. So you can find that at youtube.com/vector show. And I want to thank you all for being just the best damn audience in tech every single week. We would be nothing without you, so we really appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank
weekend.
you.
Bye.
Bye. Did we have an ad, Lori? I forgot to check.